really excited to welcome you all to the Wildfire Commons webinar series. My name is Claire Sturm, and I'm a project manager, community lead with the Wildfire Commons. And with the initiative of the Wildfire Commons, we're really driving towards what research, applications, data, and services are out there, really elevating the landscape around wildfire resilience and planning. So we're excited today to welcome Planscape, Rob Lawson, and Jordan Combs to talk about Planscape. And today you'll be hearing about Planscape, which is a decision support tool for wildfire resilience. Planscape is a free tool built to maximize wildfire resilience by helping regional planners across the U.S. prioritize landscape treatments and mitigation for wildfire risk. So excited to have today's conversation around Planscape, and I'll pass it over to Rob.
Great. Thank you, Claire, and thank you everybody for joining. Jordan and I are I'm going to run through some slides and sort of describe what Planscape is a little bit, and then Jordan's actually going to show you what Planscape is, and we're going to do a demo, which will be maybe most exciting, and then we'll come back and finish with some slides, and we're going to leave some time for questions. But I guess feel free to throw questions in the chat as we go, and we can try and make this interactive. So I'm Rob. I work at Spatial Informatics Group on the Planscape platform in a partnerships role. What is Planscape? We are, as Claire described, decision support tool. We think ourselves as a science delivery platform for landscape resilience. What does that mean? We come at this from a wildfire perspective, and I suspect many of you don't need the details of this slide explaining, but I think it's important to sort of start with a problem and think about how can we help address that problem. The wildfire problem is multidimensional. There are problems for people, there are problems that are economic, there are problems that we are switching forests to be sort of carbon emitters, not carbon sinks. There are sort of biodiversity and nature sort of issues with wildfire that we care about. There are, wildfire itself is a function of climate change, but also drives climate change. And there are water and other dimensions. And the point of this slide is to not just sort of stress that wildfire is a big problem that we should be thinking about, but also just to sort of reinforce that it is multidimensional. So as we think about how do we build wildfire resilience or landscape resilience, we need to consider multiple factors, and users thinking about their landscape, their environment, need to sort of weigh up all of these different dimensions, and that is complex and hard. And Planscape exists to try and help bridge that gap. Provocative slide to sort of wake people up, things that we believe to be true and one that we don't believe to be true. So wildfire isn't necessarily bad. One of our sort of framings for the work that we're trying to do is to move away a sort of regime from high intensity extreme wildfire. I'd encourage, more frequent, lower intensity beneficial fires. There are many different studies coming at this from many different ways, but, it's a sort of, to quote an old phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The more we can kind of work on resilience pre-fire, the less the costs and the expenditures are, during active and post-fire. Can we suppress our way out of the wildfire problem? We still throw a lot of money and resources at better detection and suppression of wildfire. One of those is a lie. So Planscape, what are we doing and what are we? This science delivery platform for landscape resilience. And really we think about sort of being the bridge here between two communities. We really start with users, and users for us, and we'll explain this a bit more, are forest collaboratives, people thinking about a landscape. Typically that's going to be thousands of acres, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe low millions of acres. It's a team sport, people coming together to think about how do they manage that landscape to have greater resilience, whatever resilience means to them. And again, it's this sort of multi-dimensional, multi-headed beast that we're trying to tame. And there is science, there is data available to them to inform some of the things that they may think is important and some of the things that we're trying to do. It is complex, it's changing, it's maybe hard to access. So Planscape exists as a free, open platform and tool to connect those users with the science and the data to allow people to make decisions that are more accurate, more collaborative, um, more quickly. Who are those users? So these, again, it's a team sport, not an individual sport. Some of the logos here, and probably it's hard to read, but I'll drill into some of this. Who is using the platform? We have thousands of users, mostly across the west of the US. The biggest group there you'll see is that sort of county resource conservation district, fire safe council, watershed group. Often people at that sort of county, hundreds of thousands of acres scale, maybe a nonprofit, architecting a collaborative that brings in federal partners, state partners, tribal partners. Often there's some sort of nonprofit sort of engagement of different type. Often there are private entities involved in these collaboratives. That could be a GIS consultant doing some modeling work. That could be a utility, a power utility, a water utility who cares about some of the outcomes that might be achieved here. Maybe it's sort of corporates, other people, insurance increasingly a part of these groups. So, part of what we think about from the tooling is like, how do we produce a venue for these collaborative users come together? And you can see here at the bottom, thousands of plans have been made covering, the total is over sort of 400 million, acres of plans. If we sort of dedupe those, about the size of California has been planned using Planscape today. On the other side of that chart, what is the data and science? We are very sort of grounded in a sort of deep sort of religion around open science. So taking what is the best science, the best data, and making that democratically available. So just, free, easy to use, accessible, transparent. There is no black box. People know what they're doing. They know what they're using. They can pull things out at any point in time. They can load their own things in. And doing this across the US, CONUS US, so excluding Hawaii and Alaska at the moment. We're also sort of open from a code perspective. It's an open source project published in GitHub. You can see the URL there. We welcome other collaborators. People can take the code whenever that is useful to them. How do we do that? Planscape isn't a company, it's a software collaborative, and we exist in this sort of bridge between a group of funders who govern the program and then sort of stewards who execute the program. So from a funding and governance perspective, a mixed group, federal agencies here, predominantly the Forest Service, philanthropy is very important, google.org, some others, More Foundation, some others that are anonymous. State agencies, California, sort of nonprofits here, EDF, American Forests, etc. Indian Land Tenure Foundation bring us that sort of tribal, sort of sovereign data perspective and the voice of the tribal indigenous users, and try to sort of bridge that sort of Western science, indigenous knowledge into the tool. We think is really important. The cheesy picture of the tent there at the bottom is to sort of, again, a sort of philosophical belief. The more people that are involved in the program, the stronger we are. And it's very much open. If you would like to get involved, we would love to talk to you. Stewards are the people that sort of receive funding, receive governance from that group and execute the plan. So doing design, doing user research, doing software development, tech transfer, etc. So Jordan and I both work at Spatial Informatics Group. We have colleagues in our sister company Signal, the nonprofit, who also work on the program. We have, very sort of strong relationships into the Forest Service, and they provide both science but also some sort of engineering. Similarly for the University of California. And I am now going to pass over to Jordan to talk us through a demo.
Excellent. Let me share my screen here. All right. Is that Planscape being shared up there? Everyone can see it all right?
Looks good.
Awesome. All right. So Planscape is open and free to use. So all you have to do is create a login, and you'll be able to access everything that I'm going to show you today. So when you log into Planscape on your home page, it is going to be a list of planning areas. Obviously, on your first time, you'll see an empty state of prompting you to create a planning area. But it's planning areas that either you have created or planning areas that have been shared with you. And so planning areas in the context of Planscape is just your outermost boundary for planning. So maybe it's your RCD, maybe it's your county, maybe it's national forest, whatever is your outermost boundary that you need to plan on. So you can go into Explore up here in the top right, and this is our map viewer. So our map viewer, so we have data, we have a variety of data sets in here that span from just for California. They are CONUS wide. They have different various spatial extents. Where these data sets come from is by working with partners and our users to provide them with data sets that are valuable to them for planning. And so this is an ongoing conversation that we like to have with people. So if you have ideas around data sets that you think would be valuable to people to have them available in Planscape, we want to hear about it, and we can get them into Planscape pretty easily and pretty quickly. So I'm not gonna kind of belabor and go through each of these individually, but you can see in here we have data that comes from, we work very closely with the Rocky Mountain Research Station, so the Fire Sciences Laboratory. So we have data that comes from FMI, that's the Wildfire Risk to Communities, tree map data, land fires in here, wildfire transmission to communities, the California landscape metrics, those are centric to California coming from the Forest Resilience Task Force. So you can go through here and just be able to view whatever data layers that might be valuable to you. There's also a nice search in here. So if I wanted to search for uh, data layers related to fire, it's going to pull up all of these fire related data layers. So I already have on here the source exposure. Some nice things on here is you can update the base map if you want to be able to view two views or four views. The map will pan around and update based on where you're looking. And so now I have source exposure and wildfire hazard potential. I can also go to four views and look and be able to compare different data layers. The other thing that we have in here is base layers. So base layers are essentially layers that you can layer on top of the data layers. And so we have protected area status. And so this allows you to be able to view what are wilderness areas, wildlife refuges, national forests. We also have ownership. So if you say, I want to see all of the areas that are U.S. Forest Service lands, I could select this. And you're going to see on the map all these areas that are green from our key here. Shows you what areas are forested. We also have wildfires coming from the interagency fire perimeter. So if I say I want to see all of the fire perimeters that burned 2020 to 2025, there's a little bit of information if you hover over those. And then boundaries, if you want to load up pods, sub-fire sheds, watersheds, Huck 12s, and then also recent treatments. And this comes from the Twig data viewer. So if I say I want to see all the treatments that have taken place in the last 0 to 5 years that are coming from Twig, I can load those up, hover over them, and get a little bit of information about them. So I'm going to go down to our single map viewer. I'll clear these off just to clear the view. So you can either upload a planning area, again, that's your outermost boundary for planning, or you can draw it. Uploading just requires a shapefile of your planning area. If you draw it, just have a nice little tool in here, allows you to draw it. I can name it and call this demo planning area and hit create. Oh, of course, I already have one. We'll call this 310. Perfect. So this will take you to your planning area overview page. And here's where we will run all the stand metrics. So as you can see, if you saw in there, my planning area was being run. I can see it's this 225,000 acres. There's a little bit of metric calculation that we have to do upon creation. So that can take various amounts of time depending on how large your planning area is. Right now, Planscape will support up to 3 million acres. We can actually do more. That's just our generally our high threshold for what our users are planning on. So if you need to plan on greater than 3 million acres, please contact us and we can make sure that you're able to do that. I am going to use a planning area that I created earlier just to be able to show you the flow of how this works. For context, the planning area that I'm using, it's just a little southwest of Reading. So this is, if I can zoom out, just for context, this is the planning area that I'm currently using. I have access to the map viewer and context of planning, so I can select all those data layers, all those base layers, all that good stuff. So you'll see over here on the left side, there's an area for notes. We're trying to develop Planscape so that it's highly collaborative, so that you're able to share this with other users within your consortium. As Rob said, we work a lot with these planning collaboratives, and so a lot of times they need to be able to view runs that other people are doing and be able to share those outwardly. So if I hit share up here, I'll be able to put an email in of someone that I want to have access to this planning area, and they would get an email. If they're already a planning area or if they're already a Planscape user, they'll go right into it. If they're not yet, they'll have to create an account and all of that, but you're able to add them at various levels. So what I'm going to show in here for this demo is our scenario planning tool. So scenario planning sits on top of Forces. So Forces is a Forest Service tool, helps optimize and prioritize. It can create project areas, prioritize existing subunits. So if you have existing project areas, you can prioritize those based on certain parameters that you put into Forces. And so we'll talk through that now. So if I do new scenario, you have two options. You have choose treatment goal or you have choose custom scenario. In this case, I'm going to choose custom scenario. I'll touch on the choose treatment goal, but for kind of understanding Forces and the prioritization process, I'm going to go through the custom scenarios. So we'll call this 310 webinar, and we'll hit get started. So your first step here, you're given a little overview of the process so you can have an understanding of all the steps that you're going to go through ahead of actually going through the scenario process. So the first step you're going to do is select your stand size. So your stand size, so these are standardized hexagonal units that we are rolling data up to that allows for Forces to be able to crawl around, and we'll have a visualization of what this looks like. But we have small, medium, and large stand sizes. Small are 10 acres, medium are 100, large are 500 acres. Generally, I would say people typically plan with small and medium, but if you want to do just like quick runs, get a general sense of where you should treat, and then you can kind of dive into it a little bit deeper. People like to do the large ones, and we recommend those for large planning areas just because it may run a little bit faster. I'm going to go with medium just for the purposes of this demo. I'm going to hit save and continue. So the first thing that we are going to be planning on or we're going to select is our priority objectives. Priority objectives are metrics that you want Forces to use to make decisions on where you would like for Forces to create project areas. And so you can select up to two. You can select one or two. If you select two, then those priority objectives will be equally weighted. So what Forces is going to do is it's going to crawl around to all of these stands. So these are all those medium stand sizes that I selected. They're 100 acres. And it's going to crawl around and it's going to assess where do I have the greatest opportunity for treatment or the greatest opportunity for attainment on the priority objective or objectives that were selected. So this case, we have our library of data that I showed in the map viewer that you can select for priority objectives. It is filtered for ones that are appropriate to be used as priority objectives. And so it's not exactly one for one, but it's filtered to make sure that one, it's available, that metric is available for your planning area because we have metrics that are that have different spatial extents. And the other is that it's appropriate to be used as a priority objective. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to pick source exposure. I can also view this layer. If I want to paint this onto the map, I can see that, and so I can get an understanding of what does this metric look like inside of my planning area. You can also get some information here, and you can download the data set as well. So I'm going to pick source exposure, and then I'm also going to go in here and go from the tree map FES 2020 data. I'm going to pick expected annual total volume killed. So this is one that we commonly do, or people are interested in to understand risk or timber transmission risk to fire of killing those. So expected annual total volume killed. If I want to paint that on there, I can also get that, and it gives me a nice legend for my risk to tree volume. That paint on there. So those are going to be my two priority objectives. I'm going to hit save and continue and go on to co-benefits. So co-benefits are you can pick up to 10 of these. They're similar to priority objectives in that you'll be able to assess what your opportunity for attainment is for each of these metrics. However, the biggest difference and the most important difference is that Forces is not going to use these metrics to prioritize or determine where to place treatments. You will just also get the opportunity for attainment for those metrics within the project areas that are created based on your priority objectives. So Forces is not making decisions based on co-benefits. They'll just also come out in the outputs that we will view together. So I'm going to look in here. Let's do total live tree volume. So since we're looking at my expected annual total volume killed, that's one thing that Forces is prioritizing on, and I can see that up here. We can do total tree volume killed, or sorry, total live tree volume. If I want to be able to view that, I can paint that on there. And then let's also go we'll go into the wildfire risk to communities. This comes out of the work with FMI. And I'll do housing unit risk and wildfire hazard potential. So I'm going to do 3 co-benefits, but like I said, you can select up to 10. And I'm going to hit save and continue. So now we're going on to the exclude step. If I look, I have all my stands that are available in my planning area, and then I can see over here in this right, my total planning area acres is 282,000. My potential treatable area is this 282,000. So where excludes comes in, where the map comes in, is you can understand what are areas that I do not want Forces to consider for treatment based on certain parameters. So we have the protected area status. So if I say I don't want to treat anywhere that is wilderness, I can view this and I can see, all right, it looks like my planning area actually does not have any wilderness areas. So if I were to select this, it's not actually going to exclude any stands because I don't have any wilderness in here. Or I could say I don't want to treat anywhere where there were wildfires in 2020 to 2025. If I select that, I can see, okay, I actually do have some intersection of some of these fire perimeters into my planning area. I'm going to deselect this. If I hit this add button to say I do want to exclude those wildfires, I can see that those stands are now grayed out. And I can see updated down here my potential treatable area that has now dropped because these stands will now be excluded. So Forces won't even know that those stands exist when it's crawling around your landscape picking areas for project areas. We also have treatments, so you can do treatments in the last 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 11 to 16. So if I say I also don't want to treat anywhere that has been treated in the last 0 to 10 years, I can view these. It doesn't actually look like I have any intersections there either, but if I hit these, I can see if any of my stands get excluded, which it doesn't look like they are. So I'll turn that off. All right, so we'll save and continue. The next thing is stand level constraints. And so these are statements that must be true in order for Forces to consider a stand for treatment. And so these are meant to be operational constraints that say, I cannot treat anywhere that has a slope greater than X%. I cannot treat anywhere that has a distance from roads that is larger than X yards. So if I put in here, I don't want to treat anywhere that has slope that is greater than, say, 30%. I put that in here, and I can see all of these stands are now grayed out. So Forces is going to say, I can't treat there, so I'm not going to create project areas in these spaces in these stands that have a slope. That's that. So I can play around with this. If I put in 20, I imagine it's going to grow quite a bit. Creeps more from the west to the east. I get a lot more stands that get constrained. I'm going to stick with 30. It's going to constrain these stands. I can see over here, okay, because of that stand level constraint, I've lost 32% of my treatable area. I still have quite a bit on the table. All these red / pink stands that are available. All right, I'm going to save and continue and go on to my treatment targets. So treatment targets, this allows you to say how much you want to treat, how many project areas do you want, and how large do you want those project areas to be. And so I can say, all right, I would like for Forces to create 1,000 acre project areas, and I want 5 of them. So I'm going to target 5,000 acres inside of my planning area for Forces to crawl around based on those priority objectives and create and prioritize project areas for me. And so it should be able to create 5 1,000 acre project areas. I'm going to hit save and run. That will run. It runs pretty quickly, depending upon your stand size and the size of your planning area, kind of changes how long things will run. This is a pretty small planning area, under 300,000 acres, and the medium stand sizes. So I imagine it'll probably run pretty quickly during the time of this webinar. It'll be done. But I'm going to look at one that I ran before this that follows the same that has the same configuration to forces as before. So if I hit this new configuration or view configuration, I can see I chose medium stand sizes. These are my priority objectives. They were the same as the ones that we just did. We just walked through together. Same co-benefits. I excluded fires 2020 to 2025, same slope. And then I asked for 5 1,000 acre project areas. So I have up here, have a project area output. So it tells me how many project areas do I have? What are the size of those project areas? Oh, and then on that previous step, I'm able to put in what my estimated cost per acre is, and then it does the math and calculates what your cost for that. If you were to treat all 5 of these all 5 of these project areas, what your total cost would be. And then if I go down here to my scenario analytics, I have priority objectives and I have co-benefits. So just as a reminder, because it's an important distinction, priority objectives are what Forces is using to make decisions. So it used source exposure and expected annual total volume killed to come up with these 5 project areas. So I'm going to turn these off just for a second so we can look at these. So as these are equally weighted, oh, let me turn that back on. It is going to rank each of these stands and then create project areas based on where you have the highest opportunity for attainment or treatment opportunity, as it is here on this y-axis. So in project area 1, my opportunity for attainment is this 2.88%. And then I have 0.05 unexpected annual total volume killed. And then as it goes into here, or into this project area 5 that it's created, it actually has higher expected annual total volume killed than the source exposure. So how you can kind of look at this and understand why Forces made the decisions that it's made. If I go in here and I turn on source exposure, we have these high levels of exposure. So as you can imagine, we have kind of this like centralized getting into the kind of mid-level of low exposure and high exposure over here, which it has created a planning area. And then we have a lot more high exposure over here on the east side of the planning area, into more of these kind of like oranges and reds, which is why it's kind of targeting these areas. And then I also could look at my expected annual total volume killed. And I imagine that we'll see similar results, that it is going to target these higher areas. But I would imagine that because the source exposure was so high on this east side, it really pulled the source exposure into here. And so or really pulled the planning areas into here. And then also, obviously, we got this planning area over here. If you recall, a lot of these stands over here that have this higher expected annual total volume killed were excluded because they didn't meet our slope constraint. And so if we had reduced so that's kind of the value of Planscape being so fast and iterative, you could reduce that slope and see if you don't create more project areas over here because you have higher opportunity for attainment in this expected annual total volume killed. But because all of these stands got excluded because of that, it didn't generate project areas over here. And then onto co-benefits. So co-benefits, as a reminder, Forces isn't making any decisions on these, but I can understand what are additional benefits that I can get from treating these areas. So let's look at housing unit risk. Load this one up. And you can imagine that in project area 2 and 4, so over here, there is higher volumes of this housing unit risk. So you can see, can lighten the opacity of the project area. You can see there's some deeper oranges into these reds in project area 2 and 4, where I have my highest opportunity for attainment of housing unit risk, and there's none in project area 5. So how we see people making decisions with this is that if I look at these 3, project area 2 and 4, or well, 1 through 4, are actually pretty equal as far as the source exposure that they can get, how much of that problem that they're actually solving for their planning area. But 2 and 4 have higher housing unit risk. So if you were to treat within project area 2 and 4, then you would probably you'll get more of that opportunity for treatment of that particular metric. And then if I load up total live tree volume, wildfire hazard potential varies, get a little bit higher in 2 and 5. I would say total live tree volume and expected annual volume killed are pretty tightly correlated as you would expect. But you can see what opportunities you have for that total live tree volume. All right, I know I've gone over a lot of information. We have a little bit more to show for our treatment effects module. I'm not sure if I should pause there and see if there's any questions to answer there or if there's any in the chat before I move on to the next part of the workflow.
So we don't have any questions yet in the chat, but if folks do have a quick question that they would like to ask Jordan, feel free to pop it in. So Kimberly asked if you could define high exposure.
Yes. So one thing that we have tried to do so Planscape is trying to kind of operate as this um, centralized space for as much planning data, valuable planning data that we can have available to our users. And so we are not exactly responsible for like the development of these data layers for we just put them in based on what our partners are producing. So this comes from the wildfire transmission to communities. And so if I wanted to go to the source of this, there's actually a link here in the metadata, and it will give you for source exposure, it will give you all of the methodology based on how they developed this source exposure. And so I believe that it was or they developed it using FSIM, if I recall correctly. Were created by intersecting simulated wildfire parameters, yeah, within building locations. Yeah. So you can go into each one of these layers and determine how it was created. So some of the links may take you to the data dictionary and it will give you the exact methods for which they developed. Some of them will take you to websites where they have maybe they can explain the methodology. So you'd have to go in here to get exactly how they developed the source exposure layer.
Thank you, Jordan. And I don't see any other questions, so I think we can keep going.
Excellent. So let us go into, but it's a great question. And then again, I'll just highlight that if you have particular source exposure or you have particular layers that are important to you for planning within your planning area, within the state, within the region, within CONUS wide, all conversations that we want to have and make those available to users. All right, so I'll talk quickly about this so we can make sure there's time for the rest. But this is our direct effects tool. So you can create a new treatment plan. So what this is going to do is allow me to apply treatments to the project areas that I've created using scenario planning. So we'll call this demo. Hit save. And I can actually go into each one of these project areas and I can apply treatments either at the stand level, so I can click on these individual stands, or I can do this nice little slider tool and I can say, all right, I'm going to do prescribed fire inside of these stands, hit apply, and it's going to apply prescribed fire to those. I'll then go into project area 2 and I'll say, all right, I'll treat half of this and we'll do heavy thinning and prescribed fire. And then maybe on these 3, so that's all single activity. We also have sequence activity where you can say, where you can do treatments at year 0, and then you can do a return treatment at year 10. So I could say at year 0, I'm going to do heavy thin and pile burn, and at year 10, I'll do heavy thin and pile burn. So you can go through, apply those to each of those stands. And then once you're done doing all of your treatment applications, I can hit run treatment analysis, hit create, and it will run. So I'll show quickly what the outputs look like, and then we can go back to the presentation. But these are modeled, or all of our outputs are modeled using FES. And so we model those treatment disturbances, and we give you outputs at year 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And so we have a number of outputs down here that, like I said, directly come from FES, and you're able to see what is your change from baseline at each one of those time steps. So I wanted to see my how much I was able to reduce probability of torching for all of my project areas at each one of these time steps. I can see that reduced mostly or zero, and then that benefit gets reduced throughout the 20 years. You can also look at individual project areas. So if I want to see just in project area one, how much reduction did I get? You can also view it at the specific stand level. So if I came in here and I wanted to view this specific stand, I could see what my reduction or what my change in, let's do potential smoke, what my change in potential smoke was over those time steps. We can be cover as well. So this is another one. This is a little bit more complex to go through, and I know we just are crunched for time. So if there's people that want to go into this in more depth, like please feel free to reach out to us. Happy to talk through it, see how it meets your needs. If there's ways that we can expand it to meet your needs even further, we definitely want to have those conversations. Um, can you do any cost optimization to determine the true plan? So right now we are not able to do cost optimization. However, it is a discussion that we are always having. And so it's something that we are aspirationally would like to build in here, and be able to allow people to understand. And you could ultimately do that as a constraint. So if you have a particular budget, once you meet that budget, create project areas based on that, and then also understand what your costs would be based on treatments. So something that we're definitely talking about, but don't have a direct plan in the roadmap for right now. Rob, anything else that you'd like to see me cover, or do you want to go back to the presentation?
I think that was great, unless there are questions from participants. See, keep them coming in the chat. That's great. But if there are others, feel free to come off mute.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Are there any opportunities to change the algorithm for spatial clustering of your projects? Like, can you make them more linear? Can you make them be less spatially correlated, where they are kind of forced away from each other?
A great question. So that is actually a setting in Forces where you are able to do exactly that. Right now we have it set at about a medium. So like for example, I did I was kind of testing out some planning areas before this, and I did one that was a little more highly constrained. And so you can see here I have some planning areas that are kind of cut. They're not quite as not quite as clumped together as we would say. And they're a little bit thinner. So we have this set, so you can set it all the way so that you only want kind of these like perfectly round project areas, because that's what you're able to treat. Or if you want them to be a little bit more linear, we're talking about being able to do field breaks. So all this to say, it is something that can be done in Forces, and it's a setting that we're looking to make like an advanced setting that somebody would be able to do. So that way you could iterate. So you could try it on like ones that are not going to be super grouped together, or all the way down to they can be a little bit more space.
Awesome, thank you.
Maybe relevant to the question as well. Whether you're small, medium, large, they're all based on hexagonal units today, as you'll see. But I think as we go forwards, breaking that out to think about other pods, hooks, other sort of areas that we might want to prioritize.
Great question. So we're currently working on. Oh, sorry. So I'm referring to a question in the chat. Can other values be considered cultural resources, utilities, assets? So really anything can be considered if you have the data layer for it. We can make it available in Planscape, and then it could be used in Forces. We are actually working with FMI now to incorporate their risk monitor framework, which will allow you to be able to prioritize project areas where you can make the greatest change to risk to certain assets. So in the ones that we're piloting and hopefully going to have out in the next couple of months, it's housing, utilities, surface drinking water, but we are looking to build that out, and so those are definitely discussions that we would like to have of what are those HVRAs that you would like to reduce risk to and prioritize those areas. All right, well, I will stop sharing and pass it back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay. Couple of case studies. This one, both from last year. This one is maybe on the smaller size. This is around Placerville. This is in California. Very much sort of focused on community. You'll see here, the sort of the core team here, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, were funding this through the El Dorado RCD, who had brought in WSP as a sort of consultant. They were using kind of Planscape. There were other sort of stakeholders and participants here, really sort of thinking around community protection. So how do we think about building, how do they think about building kind of, sort of donuts of treatments around the community of Placerville to reduce wildfire risk, but also to think about sort of carbon sequestration and other benefits. Move really quickly through planning. We're able to use the fact that Planscape is sort of freely available and sort of publishable, to use Planscape as a tool to engage the community and show them what was being planned, why it was being planned, what was going to get treated. And, so people understand why they're going to start to see masticators and chainsaws and stuff in areas around town that they might care about. Get that feedback, iterate and optimize, and they got a bunch of these treatments actually done last year and continue to do that work. So, this was all on private land, able to move reasonably quickly in the sort of tens of thousands of acres. Another sort of case study, which is a little bit more sort of unusual, perhaps this was TNC, thinking about all of the different land that they own and manage across the state of California and thinking about how to prioritize prescribed burns across those different landscapes, thinking about both current conditions of those landscapes, but also thinking about how climate's going to put pressure on those going forwards and what is likely to be under sort of stress, sort of moving from forest to non-forest and other sort of climate constraints. So using kind of Planscape to do the optimization of that. And some of that work has informed a new module, which Jordan will tell us about, sort of codifying that Planscape, that climate pressure into planning journeys for others. And that was across a much broader, hundreds of thousands of acres. And again, some of that work was executed last year and continues to be rolled out. Planscape's, it's free to use, it's anonymous to use. So often we don't, we have these thousands of users planning millions of acres. We don't, as people come to us and ask for help or want advice, we get to see some of these things, but many of the uses remain anonymous to us. Back to Jordan to tell us a little bit about the roadmap. Do keep the questions coming.
Yeah, so this is going to cover kind of what's coming over more short term over the next year. So we're expanded scenario planning. So we have expanded Planscape into this custom scenarios that I just showed you, where you can pick your priority objectives, pick your co-benefits. So all of that is relatively new. So we released that a couple of weeks ago. And so all of our work has kind of been leading up to expanding on the forces functionality. So we're going to continue to do that. So an example of that would be allowing you to be able to determine how spatially wide you want your project areas is the question that came through before. Another one that's going to be coming is being able to weight your priority objectives. So if you pick two priority objectives, you can determine the weighting. Right now, the default is equal weighting. So smaller things like that, but some larger ones that are coming. Prioritizing subunits. So rather than just creating project areas, you could prioritize subunits. So divide your project area up into subunits. So you could call those Hub 12s. They could be sub-fire sheds. They could be existing project areas that you already have. Create a scenario and Forces will prioritize those for you. Custom stand level constraints. So I showed you constraints for slope and and distance from roads, but we're allow people to do their own custom constraints. So if you only want to, so if you want to target specific areas based on a metric, you would be able to do that. The biggest one that we were pushing for is user uploaded data. Right now, I showed you the data library that is already available in Planscape. We are looking to allow users to be able to upload their own. So rather than you having to go through us to send us your data, we make it available in Planscape, you would be able to upload it on your own. So that's a summer 2026, definitely an ambitious timeline, but one that we're really working towards. You can go on to the next slide.
There's a question in the chat, Jordan. Is there any sensor
Oh.
measurements included in the data set?
Is there any sensor measurements included in the data set? Sorry, can you expand on that a bit? Okay. Well, while we wait for that to get expanded on, I can keep talking to this. Um, so I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but so we can make any data set available. So if you have specific data that you would like to make available, we can easily do that, but sorry, I'm not exactly familiar with the questions that you're asking. Um, so climate foresight, so this is similar to the TNC um uh use case that Rob showed. So this is going to be being released next week. And so you can look at what are current conditions and what are future climate conditions. So it's using the Promote framework developed by Pat Manley and Nick Povak out of PSW. So it allows you to be able to assess based on current and future climate conditions, what are best strategies for treating or handling your landscape, and then you then be able to use that into forces. So we're looking to release that likely next week. Hopefully by the end of next week it'll be out.
I think jumping back to the question in the chat, like we
Yes.
don't have any sort of live or sort of dynamic data sets. There is no weather, there are no sort of dynamic conditions in Planscape today. But obviously, remote sensing, a variety of other techniques go into sort of producing the data sets that we do have. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. Great.
Risk-based strategic planning. Oh, this is what I talked about from a question that came up before as far as being able to assess risk or values to different HVRAs or highly valued resources and assets. We are looking to do a number of treatment goals based on where you can reduce risk to surface drinking water, housing, wildfire transmission to housing, critical infrastructure. And this is all partnering with FMI out of the Missoula Fire Sciences Laboratory. So looking to have that. Currently, we're testing a proof of concept in Region 1, and then we'll hopefully have it out for West-wide in Q2. And then outcome-based change metrics. So the idea here is that right now we're just giving you direct effects or effects that occurred within the areas that were treated. But we want to be able to give outcomes based on treatments to your entire planning area. So get those indirect or shadow effects of those treatments outside of just where they occur. So we're working with FMI also. So this is a continuation of their risk monitor framework to be able to actually run a fire model inside of Planscape. And so this would be where some of that weather data and things like that can be incorporated, and people would be able to hopefully turn some of the knobs on there of what gets actually fed into a fire model like FSIM to be able to say, okay, if I do these treatments on landscape, what are my outcomes? What benefits am I getting from doing those treatments? And you would be able to model those to help make decisions on what treatments you would apply and where. Funding opportunity report. So this is one that we are currently working on largely in design right now, a little bit of development. So we're looking to release a product where you would be able to understand what are the funding opportunities to where you are planning your treatments. And so you could either upload project areas that you have or generate them in Planscape. And then we will produce a report that gives you what are your best opportunities for funding. So you could engage with somebody like Blue Forest or Freshwater Trust or also engage with beneficiaries yourself to try to gather funding for those particular project areas, or also it will inform if there's particular grants or certain criteria that you would need to meet for funding would be available in this funding opportunity report, and we're targeting June, July release for that. I think that's it for me. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jordan. The QR code there will take you through to the web app, so you can kind of start using it yourself. The domain, like the URL is app.planscape.org. If you've got any sort of ongoing questions for us, contact@sigis.com. We'll get to Jordan and I and others, and we're happy to help. We love, it's free to use. It's available to anybody. It's really helpful to us to understand how people are using it and to sort of help with questions and to help you work through projects, because that teaches us how to make the platform better. So do feel free to reach out. Any more
Will you
questions?
take a couple more questions? Would that be okay?
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm just interested in your structure. So I really like that it's a software collaborative. Does SIG actually manage it? Like, are the two of you employed by SIG?
Correct. So we are in the sort of the language of a software collaborative. We're a steward. So SIG is a steward. It receives some of the funding of the project and some of the sort of direction from that governance board. And so Jordan runs the product and engineering teams at SIG that build the program. We have designers, researchers as well who engage in the program, but also we lean, Jordan's mentioned FMI, the Fire Lab at the Forest Service. You are very involved through funding and governance, but also do a lot of the work there. There are other people in different entities that also exist in that sort of steward role. So it's not SIG isn't the sole sort of it's part of the program, but not the entirety of the program, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Is it primarily publicly funded? Like the
It
ongoing
is
operation of it?
it's probably a sort of rough equal balance between state and federal funding and philanthropic funding.
Okay.
Forest
And
Service and Google.org being the two major funders, but a range of other people. And other people provide resources of different types.
you said Forest Service, and who's the other major funder?
Google.org, the
Oh, okay.
philanthropic side of
Yeah.
it.
Can can you tell me, just in general, how this tool differs from Vibrant Planets?
My perspective is probably the previous answer, in that this is, there is no for-profit sort of venture-backed entity behind this. This is a group of organizations and entities coming together because they care about the problem space to build a sort of free, open science, publicly available tool that anybody can use. So I think we probably exist in the same problem space. I think there are similarities. We both use Forces as our spatial optimization algorithm. So that's a Forest Service product. Planscape is free. It's that group of organizations who care about, think we're better off coming together and doing this collaboratively because it is a societal level problem. So it's that sort of philosophical, where Vibrant Planet is a privately, owned venture-backed company. And I think
Okay.
there are different features, and I think we've approached some of the technical solution in quite different ways, but I think that's the biggest difference.
Is the scale the same as far as how far you can take this planning tool to an on the ground project? Would you say the scale of the two tools are the same or are they different?
I apologize. I don't know their tool
Okay.
as well as ours. I think, we are available CONUS wide, so anywhere in the US apart from Hawaii and Alaska. Last time I looked, I think Vibrant Planet was mostly some slice of the Western US, but I don't know that that's current.
Okay. Great, thanks. And I just have one more. Really appreciated your statistic at the beginning. $1 spent on resilience saves 13 on avoided costs. Where can you reference that?
Yes, but not this second. I will
Okay.
make sure that goes out in the follow-up to the meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. It's a great stat. Thank you very much. Really appreciated your webinar.
Thank you for the great questions.
I just want to say thank you so much, Rob and Jordan, for the great presentation. Really great to be able to hear about Planscape, present and future, and excited for the next iteration. And I'll just also mention that Planscape is listed in the Wildfire Commons Marketplace. If you would like to learn a little bit more about how you can utilize it from an instance in comparison of some of the data that's also available within the Wildfire Commons. So a great way to kind of check out these tools and remind yourself of all of the great access points that Rob and Jordan have covered today. And we hope that you'll join us for the next session. It's coming up soon. It's actually going to be this Thursday from 9:30 to 10 a.m. We're going to be covering the Shrubwise Data Challenge as an overview. And if you're interested in the data challenge, it's a great opportunity to listen in and hear how to get started. But with that, we'll free the community up. Thank you again, Rob and Jordan, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, everybody.